These are yacon seedlings, courtesy of Nichols Garden Nursery in Oregon. If you want to get your own yacon seedlings, you can find that link in the show notes as well as on our website, the wisconsinvegetablegardener.com. What are yacons? They are a tropical or a heat-loving plant from South America. They are related to the sunflower as well as the Jerusalem artichoke. They put a tuber on, and at the time of harvest, they look very similar to a sweet potato, but the taste can be kind of different based on who you talk to. Basically, an apple with a little bit of celery taste in it. These are, again, a long season growing plant. We know that they can be grown in zone 5A where we are at, and even a little farther north in zone 4A. We've seen it happen. We've seen great results. So it's not time to plant these yet, but you can get them. They will, Nichols Garden Nursery will ship these to the lower 48 states, and we want to plant these when it's hot outside, so about the time we would plant our peppers. But we can go ahead and prepare the garden bed like we have here. We only need a little area because we're gonna put one here and one here, 24 inches apart. So I put some compost down here. We've weeded the bed, and all I'm going to do is take this leaf mulch and bring over top to hold moisture in and just kind of suppress any additional weeds that we may have in this area. And then this will be our yacon bed for the season. Now there are ways to get the plant to grow again next year. There's rhizomes that you can save, but we'll get into all that later on in the season. So if you're interested in growing and finding out more information about the yacon plant, you can click on the link below, courtesy of Nichols Garden Nursery up in Oregon. Now, a yacon is a sunroot. It is related to the Jerusalem artichoke, but it can handle the cold just a tiny bit more. The harvest item on this is the tuber. You can get quite a lot of tubers off of it. When you harvest them, they kind of have the resemblance of a sweet potato. So we're going to plant these. You can plant these at the same depth that they are in the container, or you can actually plant them a little deeper, 2 to 4 inches deeper than what that is in the container. And what will happen here is these roots here will all start to develop and start putting tubers on. And there's a worm right there. Okay, so you want a good fertile soil, full sun. These things are going to get 5 to 6 foot tall, and you want to space them 2 foot apart. I talked about the tubers that you're going to harvest. You can also, there's going to be a rhizome on the root, and we'll talk about this when we harvest them, that you can save and you can replant these. They will die once it gets, the top portion will die once it freezes. You can harvest these rhizomes and keep them inside and bring them back, because this is a tropical plant that can handle a little bit of the cold. So I'm just going to very, very gently loosen the roots up here. And we're just going to plant this right in the ground. A little deeper, that's about right. All right, backfill. I'm going to bring some leaves that I've got here just to help hold some of the moisture in. All right, that one's good. Now this leaf here is yellowing, so I'm just going to pop it off. It's not going to hurt the plant at all. Pull this one out. Loosen it up a little bit. Let's see some of these roots here. A lot of these are going to produce those tubers. And all right. And that's as easy as it is to plant the yacon sunroot. Now we're just going to wait for it to grow, and we'll harvest these in the fall. About the same time we'll harvest some of the Jerusalem artichokes, and then we'll talk about how we can properly store these to get a little more life out of them so we can eat them during the winter months. So the yacon, or the sunroot, it's something that maybe you have tried, or maybe you will consider trying next year when it comes to growing a unique item in your vegetable garden. Yacons are a tropical plant that has a root that is harvested that looks similar to like a sweet potato, but has a taste of between an apple crossed with a celery, or an apple, celery, watermelon type of mixture in flavor. and they grow much like the Jerusalem artichoke. Well, these are not as growing as great as I had hoped they would because of the inconsistency of warm weather that we've had. We had some days over 80 degrees, and we've had a lot of days under 80 degrees. And for some of you, that may be a relief compared to where you're living. But we want to give these plants the best chance because these should get 3.5 to 5 foot tall, and then we'll dig them up in the fall. So we're looked at a couple of options on what to do. We've watered them, which helps, but also we got 2 of them here. So we're going to take a tomato cage and put around one. And then we're going to wrap some 4 mil plastic, not tight around it, but going to act as kind of like a miniature little greenhouse. Now putting this cage around it, I want to be very gentle with these leaves. And nestle the leaves up over top of the bracing here. All right, that one's down. Okay. Try to get around just a little bit more. Okay, so now the cage is there. I'm a little loose on this side here because I'm in a crack in the ground, so I'm going to fix that by moving it over. Okay, that's better. Now we're pretty secure. So I'm going to take this 4 mil plastic, and I'm really not sure, this is a totally an experimental project to see if this particular type of application is going to be beneficial or not beneficial at all. So that's why we have the control over here. Now you use 4 mil plastic if you're in like a, now you'd use the plastic similar to this or this if you were using it on top of a cold frame in late fall or early spring. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to wrap this. Now I'm not going to make this airtight. I'm not going to enclose the top here. But what I am going to do is add some tape here to try to close the edges off a little bit. Let's get the scissors out so those are ready. And find the end of the tape, which is right there. And just put a little bit of tape, kind of snug it around. And we'll cut that off there. And kind of take the top here, roll it under. Put some tape there around that ring there. Now this could be made in any shape, form, or fashion. Now what I will do is I will take, and I'm just gonna, I just kind of want to basically put a blanket around this thing is kind of what my mindset is, but not so much that it just seals it off to where it's 900 degrees in there and this thing completely bakes. I want it to mimic more of a tropical environment, and we're going to have to add some more tape. But that's kind of what we're sitting at. When you look down the center there, it doesn't look terrible. I don't know how happy it will look in a couple of days, but we'll see if this adds any growth. I'll mark it and then come back in 1 week and see if it has increased or decreased, like, you know, starting to die off. And then if it has helped this, and we'll check in on it as harvest becomes closer, we may go ahead and jump on this one and do the same thing to try to intensify the heat around the plant so it can produce more roots. And we can have yacons this fall. So what we did was we took 4 mil plastic and wrapped around the base, but left the top open as somewhat of a vented greenhouse, and they really shot up. Now, again, these are a very warm weather crop, or warm weather plant, and it did frost and freeze, so the plant has died back. Typically, these will put a flower on, similar to what the Jerusalem artichoke will. So we went ahead and wrapped this one as well, and we noticed as soon as we wrapped it, in about a week to 2 weeks later, they really put on the top growth and began to grow higher. So this is about 4 foot high here. They'll get between 3 and 5, so we're pretty close on that. Now, in a perfect scenario, we should dig these up and find tubers, which is the edible portion, and they'll look similar to sweet potatoes, and they should have a very pleasant taste to them. So what we're going to do here is There is some green left on these plants, but as you can see, they're burnt. They're dead. They're not going to come back. So we're just going ahead and dig these up. We'll leave the plastic on. Now what we have found with this experiment, with this plastic, we can go ahead and do this with our pepper plants when we put them in the ground next year. Wrap them with plastic, but leave the top open, and this should really increase the productivity and the growth of peppers if it worked well for the yacons here. So we'll get this all pulled up, and then let's go ahead and I'm going to cut the top off here so we can. Now we should be able to save the rhizomes for next year. That can go in the compost pile if we do it right. So let's go ahead and, I've never dug these up before. I don't know what to expect. I don't know how far back to go. Let's see what I got here. All right, what I'm looking at here, all right, you can kind of see these are rhizomes here. These, I believe that's what those are. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we got. All right. Okay, so we've got yacons. Now here, I got to dig around and see what more I can find. These are what I am very certain are the rhizomes. Now we should be able to put these in some sand, keep them in the basement, and then come back and replant them. You can see right here how that has a growth on it, all these little eyes, kind of like a potato. That's what we're going to save. Now this down here is the actual edible portion. So let me dig around, see if I can find any more roots, which I don't think I will. I'll dig that one up, and we'll go back to the picnic table and see what we end up with here. Test one, too? Yeah. All right, so we brought the roots over here, the tubers that we've harvested. We got two different root systems here. This one here, much larger roots. This one, and I don't know if it has a contributing factor, but we wrapped this one with the plastic about 3 weeks before we wrapped this one with the plastic, as mimicking the greenhouse effect to them. Now, the rhizomes is what we're looking at here. These are these purple nodules that are coming off the stem that actually has growth, has the eyes on them, and it's growing. Now, what we've researched and found is that you should be able to disconnect the root system here, these tubers, and we can put those in they'll keep, these are, the research that we found says these should keep for up to 8 months. We can put them in a windowsill and they will become sweeter over time. We'll talk about the taste in a moment. So we can detach these from the root itself, and these rhizomes we can save until spring. Now the research also indicates that we can just take these rhizomes and just put them in a open container like you would potatoes, like you would store potatoes, and they'll be fine until spring. You can also take these and put them in sand and kind of keep them moist that way. They're not hopefully going to grow in the sand, but we may do one of each because we've got about 18 different rhizomes between the two plants. So that's another thing. Now if you want to order these from Nichols Garden Nursery up in Oregon, you'll have to do that in the spring, and based on where you're located, they may or may not ship them to you. They have restrictions on that. But we will leave a link in the show notes below to where you can read up more about the yacon plant. Now these are obviously very small plants, or very small roots. From the pictures and the images and the videos that we've seen, these can get 5 to 7 pounds per plant. You're getting, you know, what they would appear to be sweet potato roots, but they would be 8 to 10 inches long and 4 to 5 inches in diameter. These are very good for building up your microbial life in your soil, as well as they're extremely healthy for you as an individual. So let's talk about the taste. The taste should be a cross between an apple and celery. Over time, these will become sweeter. We've tried these, and to us, Holly believes they have a little bit of that celery taste. I think they have more of a crisp apple taste and a hint of carrot to them. But we'll let them set in the windowsill and over time and see if they become sweeter. So again, the yacon plant, our first time trying it, very successful. in our book is a success because we have something that is an edible portion that we can try, and then we can also save these rhizomes to plant again next year. So again, Nichols Garden Nursery, thank you very much. We appreciate the contribution to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener, and we are very pleased with the results. And now that we've learned this much, we can continue to our education on growing the yacon for years to come. So it's been about 80 days since we've harvested the yacons that you just saw after the frost took and killed the tops off. So one of the problems, or one of the questions we had were, how can we hold on to the rhizomes so we can replant them come this spring so we can get another harvest of yacons? So we'll talk about that in a moment. So part of the roots, or the tubers that we harvested, we ate right away. Some of the other ones here we left in the fridge. And what has happened, because we weren't certain what may or may not happen, you leave a potato alone, it just grows a few eyes on it and nothing changes. But this is a whole new adventure for us. So what we have found is, since they've been in the fridge, they have dried up and they've got like this mold on it. Now we're not going to eat these, but if they didn't have any mold on it, we could certainly cut them up and put them in a soup or stew and go that route. So one of the things you might want to think about is, if you're growing yacons from Nichols Garden Nursery, getting the rhizomes come this spring, you can simply eat the tubers. Now they're not going to go bad this quickly. Remember, we're 80 days past harvest now. But, you know, keep in mind on that they do begin to dry out. There are probably other methods of prolonging storage than what we have done. But so that being said, that's what's left of the roots, the tubers. So let's talk about the rhizomes, because this was a big question that we had. How can we preserve these rhizomes? So what we did was, I took the major portion of the rhizome, the root portion here, and put it in just this is about a 1 quart plastic container, and we put sand in it. Normal, ordinary beach sand that we had here on the property. So I'll show you here, and we made it slightly moist. Now you don't want to make it too moist because you don't want to hydrate these things to the point where they think they're going to grow. So and later we found out that this was the right decision to make. So here's what you got. You've got these here that are the rhizomes. These are the roots. So if you can see right there, you've got a grow tip that's going to break off, which is not a terrible thing. You've got a grow tip here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 rhizomes on this particular root zone. Now, what we can do here, we're going to leave it alone. We're going to put it back in the container here and put slightly damp sand. The way we're storing this is in the bottom of the refrigerator, not in the crisper, but just on the bottom shelf in the back. This keeps it a very cool temperature where these rhizomes do not believe that it's time to grow. They kind of go into dormancy. We have found that this is the best way, in our experience, to prolong these, to keep these. Now these are extremely solid, these are healthy, these are alive. There's nothing wrong with these rhizomes. So we're going to keep the soil or the sand here. When I say moist, I don't mean sopping wet. I mean just enough to where you can see the color of the sand slightly change pigmentation, but you don't want it to be over wet because these rhizomes are going to pick up that moisture and try to grow. So we decided to take one rhizome off of one of these to see what would happen. And what has happened is it's a very solid unit. Got one growing tip there. It's not going to grow until we get it into soil and the temperature begins to rise. So that has worked as well. So keep these in a damp sand consistency in the back of the fridge. These will last until it's time to put them out in the garden. One other tip that we have found after doing some research is these rhizomes are just like regular potatoes or Jerusalem artichokes in the tuber fashion. And what I mean by that is, if this was a large enough rhizome, you could divide this to where you could have 2 growing tips on each side, and then you could double basically your root stock for the yacon. But this one is not large enough that we feel that we should divide it. It's got 1 growing tip, 2 growing tips. So with what we've got here, we've got 11 plants, possibly 12 based on what some of the rhizomes look like and the size of them in this other one that we've not exposed. So this is the conclusion of the growing the yacons from Nichols Garden Nursery up in Oregon. Again, the link's on our website. If you want to get these rhizomes, you can purchase them in the spring. And then once you have them, this is a way you can prolong and reuse and grow them year after year. But most information that we found, you're going to have to dig them up, put them in a method like we have here in order to keep them. If you just leave them in the ground, they're probably not going to make it because they are more of a warm weather crop.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.